Woodlands and waters are connected, even if they aren't in direct contact. Any given parcel of forested land is found within a watershed. A watershed is an area of land that contains a common set of streams and rivers that all drain into a large body of water. In what ways does forest management positively affect water quality?
One of the main ways forest management affects water quality is just by forests are very good at infiltrating precipitation, be it rainfall or in the spring snowmelt, and they infiltrate it into the groundwater, into the soil profile. Some of it goes down into groundwater. Parts of it come out at the bottom of the hill, back into surface flow and on downstream and so on. But forests work to really put the brakes on a watershed. The more forest cover you have, generally, kind of like wetlands do the same thing. They slow down bounce or flashiness of a watershed, which is characterized by rapid increases or drops in water flow levels. And so they're just generally they're just moderating watershed response to precipitation events. And so forest cover in that sense is good. You know, whether it's high value hardwoods like oak, or it's relatively young forests that are recently been harvested and are coming up again into popple, or even, I suppose, box elder. You know, they all infiltrate precipitation at the ground. So maybe from a habitat perspective, they're not the same, but from a water quality perspective, forest cover is forest cover. And so that's the main function that forests provide for water quality, is keeping quantity down and speed down, velocity down. So just keeping some kind of forest cover out there is real important to the watershed. And to a great extent, the material data supporting this is summarized in DNR's large lake study they did. I think it was completed in 2013. And that looked at, I think it was about 11 or 1,200 fish management lakes across the state, and just analyzing as you open up the watershed or deforest the watershed, at what point of land conversion does phosphorus to the lakes start to really take off and increase rapidly. And they found that that was at about 25%. And so if you can keep the reverse being then the goal, if you can keep 75% of the watershed forested, the receiving water, and mainly lakes in their study, should have good water quality well into the future. And so that became a very useful metric, very simple, easy for the public to understand, even easy for even we can understand it, and communicate it to others. And so it became somewhat of a rallying point. And so a simple but practical goal. And I remember an article in the Tribune many years ago, it was back in the 1990s, I was struck by, and it said, it was an editorial, and it said, government is most effective when its goals are really simple and straightforward.
What kind of incentives are available to landowners that want to keep their property forested?
Yeah, so SFIA is an incentive to landowners that don't really want to develop their land. It varies. There's three options: 8, 20, or 50-year covenants. It's not a conservation easement, but it's somewhat similar, and where the landowner agrees not to develop that property or convert that forest cover to something else. And it can be, like I said, either 8, 20, or 50-year installments. And so I think it goes up to $15 per acre for those payments. That's an annual payment process for the landowner. So it's an incentive to, since forest cover produces many public benefits, whether it's wildlife habitat or water quality and so on, beauty, aesthetics, good for tourism, et cetera, et cetera. There's a number of public benefits there, and so the legislature has seen fit to encourage landowners with that kind of incentive program. Just recently, I think it was last year, the SFIA program enrollments just crossed the 1 million acre mark.
What kind of forest management can be done on the land while under an incentive program?
We talked about forest conservation, of just the keeping forested lands forested is important, but so too is improving management of those existing forest lands. And so these agreements, be they SFIA or conservation easements, usually do not restrict. In fact, they encourage forest management. And so these lands, although being conserved and long-term and staying in forest cover, are going to be producing materials from time to time, forest products, be they cords, as in the pulp industry, or boards, as in the sawmill take on things. And we think that's real important. That gives an economic benefit to these lands as well, because if we subdivide the forest up, cut it up into too small pieces, they're no longer viable for efficient management, and industry starts to lose interest. And so there's an important economic benefit to keeping large tract forests going as well. The other real important concept is landowners choose. We just try to make the array of options understandable to the landowner, and then landowners choose which option might be best for them. And so that can be anything from nothing to a forest stewardship plan, maybe, which is a common entry point for folks thinking about learning more about their forest land and what its potential might be. And then on into cost share on projects like tree planting, if that's of interest, or timber harvest in some cases, or some of these forest conservation incentive programs. So landowners choose is really an important concept to the whole forest conservation initiative.
Does this apply to smaller forests or only large tracts of land?
Every parcel in the watershed, you could argue, is important. Certainly larger parcels impact a greater chunk or percentage of the watershed. And so if you're trying to reach a 75% forest protection goal and you're at, many of these minor watersheds are at 65 to 70%, a 200 or 300 acre parcel that suddenly the landowner gets interested in a forest stewardship plan, maybe wants to put the land into SFIA, that can move the needle in a typical minor watershed 2 or 3% pretty easily. And so that's a major, when you're already at 65 or 70, that's a major portion of the distance to go. And so there's reasons for pursuing or talking to large landowners first. But on the other hand, landowners often pay attention to what their neighbors do. And so if just early adopters of any size or scale are important as well. And sometimes we really see these incentives taking off in a neighborhood where one landowner adopts, for instance, conservation easement, and then pretty soon landowners hear about this and start asking them questions, and they think, well, that's all there is to it?
That's right. Forming a plan is often easier than you think. A forest stewardship plan is a non-binding written document that lists your land's potential, what you want to accomplish, and specific actions you can take to accomplish those goals within a given time frame. When written by a certified plan writer, such as your local SWCD, a forest stewardship plan qualifies landowners to apply for local or state tax relief and incentive programs. You can find out more about what your management options are by visiting with your local SWCD. Funding provided by the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities.